right. Now, if you've been following the story so far, you have some qualities, you've started hiring people, and your team is coming together. I want to talk about a few things because this series of sessions is about building and leading great teams. If you want to be a leader of a great team, one of the qualities, and that's what this particular module is about, which is delegating smartly. A lot of leaders have the habit of taking on work and dumping it and putting it onto the team and then just waiting for that work to happen. This is it's just called dumping. And delegation is not the same as dumping. And on the other hand, there are some leaders who want to do everything themselves and they want to watch the work closely, almost do it themselves. If they've given it to somebody, keep watching them, and sort of micromanaging. This is probably the other end of the spectrum, which becomes really bad. And once again, you might as well do the work yourself. There is a happy medium in between, which is what I'd like to call smart delegation. What makes smart delegation smart delegation? Well, one of the qualities of smart delegation is that you have to identify what kind of work would suit which person. And I'm going to talk a bit about how you could do this better as we go on. But if you've understood your team well, you would be able to say that, this person is very outgoing and likes to meet new people and talk to new people. I would delegate work to them which involves people interaction. Here's a person who likes to really go into details, accuracy, and specifics and plan things by just sitting by themselves and applying their mind. I would give them analytical, planning, detail-oriented work. So a big dimension of good quality delegation is to delegate the right thing to the right person. However, you could do this and your delegation could still flop. There are enough leaders out there who've delegated and then, the work didn't come out well, or it didn't get completed, or they missed the deadline. So the next part of the story is what I'd like to call delegation intensity. And what you do here is slowly move the person from zero delegation to about 100% delegation. Zero delegation means the person in my team does nothing. I'm going to do everything. 100% delegation means the person is just on their own. I don't even have to watch the person, and perhaps at a later stage, the person can even replace me. That's 100% delegation. However, it's not a jump from 0 to 100. There are several steps in between. What I'd like you to take back from this is that make sure that transition is slow, extremely slow. Initially, like I said, micromanaging and doing it completely by yourself is one end of the spectrum. Dumping it on the other person is the other end of the spectrum. There's a journey to go from one to the other. Initially, you would want the person to start thinking in the right direction. And many leaders sort of overlook this. They start to get people to do while mentally they're not ready for that activity or that particular task or that job. So it's important to get them to be mentally ready for that task before you get them to actually do it. So I would start with this, talking to the person, maybe initially just allowing the person to observe you doing the job. No talking, no thinking, allowing the person to just observe you doing the job or to observe somebody doing the job well. This is what I'd like to call, it's not even shadowing, it's pre-shadowing. Shadowing comes later. You're going to just observe the person and not even ask questions. Make a note of all the questions that you have, but just observe somebody who's doing it well. So if I have a subordinate and I'm going to pass on something that I'm doing to that subordinate, I'm going to tell that team member, just watch me. No questions asked. No doing anything yourself, just watch. Another step after that, if you want to slowly push the person, is to tell the person, watch me, but now you're allowed to ask me questions as I go along. This is a very engaging period because that person's been holding all these questions back for so long and now brings out those questions. So I'm going to talk to that person as I'm doing work. The person's going to say, why are you doing this? Could you not do it like this? Is it so important that we finish this right now? So the person's going to come up with a set of questions that they'd like to ask you. This is good. This is a good phase to be in. It's important that you provide answers to those questions and not shut the person up, because this is a big part of the person's development. Do remember that the person's still not started doing anything. The person's just becoming mentally engaged in that job. So if I'm just doing something as simple as making cold calls, and I'm going to lead this team, and I've hired somebody to make cold calls. Initially, I'm going to make the cold calls, or somebody's making really good cold calls. This person's going to observe that person, no questions asked. Second step, observe the person, and now you can ask questions. So you can say, why are you making so many cold calls in the morning? Maybe one of the questions, and I'm going to answer that. How come you don't make cold calls on Monday? Well, I'm going to tell that person, well, most people are busy on Monday. They're not interested in taking your calls and answering questions and so on. So Monday afternoon is a good time to start, but Tuesday is the best day. So I'm going to give that person answers to all their questions. This gets them mentally involved and engaged. And they might also ask you things like, why do you start with this? Why do you keep saying I'm calling from and the name of the company? How come when somebody disconnects or doesn't pick your call, you don't call them back? So they might have a lot of questions, and you just keep answering those questions. This is the second stage of delegation. The third stage of delegation is when the questions have exhausted. It's something like a child growing up. The questions have exhausted, and now the person's ready to sort of have their own contribution, and they know all the answers because they've asked you. This is a good time for you to get that person started and tell that person, test that person with how mentally clear are they about the job. They're still not doing anything. So I'm going to tell that person, so I'm supposed to make this call to this person. What do you think I should do next? Then the person will say, you have to open the software, look for the number, find the person's name, check that person's profile on LinkedIn, get to know something about that person. That person's going to guide me. They're not doing anything yet. I'm still doing everything. This is a second level of engagement. So we've crossed 3 steps. Just observe, no questions. Observe with questions. Thirdly, you're not just observing, you're telling me what to do. And I'm going to correct you if you're wrong. I'm going to tell you, no. For this particular client, I don't think I should do this. I should do something else. The next step is when I allow that person to make some calls. But I'm going to watch that person very closely. I'm going to observe that person. I'm going to stop working and say, no, you're going to make the call from tomorrow. You're going to do cold calls. And I'm going to watch this person on their journey. I might just check what you're going to do next, what you're going to do next, why you're doing this. Now I might be asking the questions, and they might answer me. And this is a good process of learning. And once you've started off on that step 4, you realize the person's almost on their own. There's a point where I realize I'm not doing much. He knows what to do. He's doing it himself, or she's doing it herself. I'm just being around. And that's the time to tell that person, look, now you're on your own. But if you need me, just call me. I'm right here. And this is the time when I'm not watching that person or asking them questions. I'm telling that person, I'm moving away. This is when you stop micromanaging and tell that person, reach out to me. If you have a problem, call me. If you have something to ask, get in touch with me. If you're stuck, just reach out. So this is a time when the person's on their own. If you don't hear from that person, that means it's probably good news. And once that's done, you give that person the overall target, which is where you're telling that person, this is complete delegation. Step 5, where you're telling that person, look, you have to make 30 calls every day and fix 3 appointments. That's your job. You have to just do this. And I'm going to just check on that person and ask the person, what's happening? Last week, 5 working days and we had 10 appointments. So you actually missed out on some appointments, Is there something you'd like to know? Is there something that you still can't do properly? Do you need my help? And I think that's just touching base to find out how things are going. So this is a good way to delegate smartly, as opposed to dumping or just continuously micromanaging. Micromanaging, watching closely could be required initially, but not later. Later, the person's on their own. And you have to just trust that person to do their job. And if the person's consistently making those calls and fixing 3 appointments, it's time to up the notches a bit and say, maybe we should go from 3 to 4, or maybe even slower. So 5 threes are 15 appointments in a week. So maybe we should just move that. to about 18, and then the next week 20, based on how you're doing. So this is a good way of doing what I call smart delegation, and it's a great way to manage a great team.